Welcome to the Exhibit A podcast.
We are live, and we have Ralph Frammolino with us. Hello, my friend.
Hi, how are you doing, Don? Thank you for inviting me.
No, thank you. I love having high-caliber people on this program. I feel very honored and privileged to have you. We are going to talk today about what you do for people and how it really mixes with the type of work that I do and what my law firm does. And the theme today is going to be what to do when someone is trying to smear your name in public. And Ralph, could you imagine that happens in divorce cases?
Oh my gosh, what a shock.
Yes, spouses do nasty things to each other, and that's why I wanted to bring you in, because you have an unusual occupation, one that I'm a little bit jealous of. I wish that I could write and do the things that you do, but fortunately I could rely on you as well. So let's talk, before we get to the topic, I want to talk about you.
Sure.
And first of all, you're the president of Pivot Hound Communications.
That's right.
Okay. And that means that you're running a crisis and strategic communications firm that offers high-end media relation services to clients. Mm-hmm. You help clients take control of their own stories or defend their good names when they come under attack. And your services include crisis communications, planning and execution, making media placements for earned coverage, preparing clients for press interviews, coordinating social media efforts, and what else do you do?
Well,
branding
in a very light way, yes. But mostly it's to get people comfortable telling their stories. And many times people don't even know what a good story they have. And since I was a reporter for 30 years, I can listen to what people are saying, and they'll think A, when actually their best story is B. And I help them build that story, build that narrative.
Okay. And we'll talk a little bit later about why that's helpful for you, helping people maintain a reputation or trying to rehabilitate people who are under attack. Okay, you are a graduate of Michigan State University, and I know that because we've attended football games together.
Yep.
And you're a pretty big fan of your alma mater. Now, looking on the LinkedIn, I looked at your biography before you came in today, and I noticed something that didn't surprise me, and that you majored in journalism. Do you have a BA and a master's degree in journalism?
Just a bachelor's.
Okay. And then you also have a counseling psychology degree.
Well, I never completed it, but
Okay.
I learned a lot from the master's program that I was in. And of course, I was going when I was working at a newspaper at the LA Times. And as usual, journalism took over my life. I came across a big story and had to drop out of the program, but I learned a lot about speaking to people, talking to people, and how to ask questions.
Yeah, and I was going to say that when I read that, I also saw that you attended California Lutheran University, counseling psychology.
Right.
You attend a program there. When I talk with you, it seems like you could see right through me all the time. I don't know what it is, but you have a sense of like, how you doing, Don? You know, and I'm like, God, am I talking to a doctor? Or am I talking to an investigative reporter here or what? But it's if you don't mind me saying, it's a little bit eerie how much you know people.
Okay.
And I'm sure that your psychology helped you in some respects when you're talking to people about their reputations and getting them to see parts of themselves that they didn't know about.
Right, and part of it is, when I talk to people, many times it's in a crisis situation, and it's trying to calm them down and let them see what is really in front of them, because they're dealing with their worst fears. And many times it's a lot better than they think, and to try to show them a way out. So it's listening, mostly.
Yeah.
When you go through a program like that, you learn how to let people tell their stories, and you learn how to understand their stories. It's the most basic human instinct is to be understood. And once a reporter understands that as a basic instinct, a reporter will be able to open up whole worlds of information.
Okay. So speaking of a reporter, you were an investigative reporter for the LA Times for 24 years and 8 months.
Right.
Right.
Well, I wasn't investigative reporter for the full time. At the end of my career, I was on the Metro investigative staff. Yes,
Okay.
but I covered city affairs, state government, the environment, and higher education.
And you also worked for other very well-known publications. I know you worked in Chicago for a while.
I did. I was with the Chicago Tribune, but that was as an intern when I was a youngster.
Okay. That's when you started.
Mostly with the Los Angeles Times.
Okay. And that career as an investigative reporter led you to a very interesting and well-known investigation that you and another reporter did, and that was investigating the J. Paul Getty Museum. You investigated the antiquities scandal, and later you co-authored a book that got some notoriety. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Sure. And that was the story that interrupted my master's program, by the way. And it had to do with the J. Paul Getty Museum and other major American museums not really being totally forthcoming about where they were getting a lot of these antiquities. You go into a museum and you'll see something that's beautiful. It's an old Greek artifact, and it'll say from a Swiss collection. Well, actually, that's a little bit of a clue that it was probably looted from the country of origin, and it was brought to Switzerland to cool off, and then sold to the museums. Well, the museums knew that this was going on, but they weren't talking about it. So we helped expose that by reporting about the Getty. We had a lot of internal documents showing that they knew all along that they were buying looted art, stolen goods, and they felt that they were, following a higher purpose by exhibiting this for people to see. But in the end, they had to face Italian law, and that's when it all came crashing down. So Chasing Aphrodite is the name of the book. That is the book that talks about this phenomena, and it's sort of like a detective story. You follow these antiquities.
Yeah, and I'm going to say it was a great reading.
Thank you.
I love that book, and my respect for you is immense. That must have been something that just working on changed you. It
did.
Probably sharpened your skills, and it must have given you a great sense of fulfillment because for me, you've changed the world somewhat. I mean, you and your co-author exposed this so much that I think it put the industry on its heels.
Well, yeah, and the Getty, for instance, had to give back 40 antiquities, including its signature statue, which is Aphrodite, 7.5 feet. And it turned out not to be Aphrodite after all. But then the Met had to give back one of its most beautiful pieces, the Euphroneous Crater. You had Boston, Cleveland, and Princeton all had to give back artifacts. Over 100 artifacts had to be given back worth more than $1 billion. It was all taken illegally.
For an unassuming man, you have made some big changes in this world.
Well, thank you.
Because that's just one of them. I mean, I know that you've also worked on a lot of high-profile cases.
Mm-hmm.
You've helped many high-profile clients in a variety of ways. Like for people that may have some slandering going on in the public eye and stuff, and you've helped them. Can you explain that part of your business, how you help people?
Well, it's interesting because it was that experience covering the Getty that kind of opened my eyes to the limitations of journalism. And journalism has a rubric. It has a way of approaching the world. It's black-white. A lot of nuance is lost, and a lot of background, a lot of context. And so as I was reporting that, I kept thinking, these are really, really smart people. How did they get into this spot? It's not like they're stupid. It's not like they said, we're going to go out and break the law. What was this all about? And the more I reported on it, the more I realized that there are so many different viewpoints to everything. And the more information you get, the different the narrative becomes. And so it started to expand my view of human behavior, my view of how we view people and how we tell their stories. And I ended up in the place I'm in now, where I realized that there are different perspectives, obviously, and they can be just as compelling. And we are now in a media landscape where there are not monopolies on the truth. You have social media, you have, that includes Facebook, that includes Twitter. You can get your story out, right? And we are also in an age where I can identify myself, if I want to, as gay, as straight, as a leaning more towards female, leaning more towards male. I self-identify. Well, I get to tell my story. It's my story. And so that's what I help people do, identify and tell their story, many times under media stress because people are being attacked by, their competitors, by haters, and they're feeding things to reporters. And so we battle back by saying, no, this is the full narrative. This is the full story. Here are some facts you need to consider. And it becomes like the law, where you have people who take different positions, and then in the end, the reader or the news consumer is the judge. He or she makes that judgment of what is the correct narrative. So that's the ecosystem I'm working in today.
And because of your experience and your connections and your knowledge of the industry, you're able to go to the right places to try to counter the influences. Can you talk to us a little bit about some of the examples you would give on, or to a client who came in and said, hey, somebody's attacking me in public. I've got a lawsuit that's possibly pending against me, and I'm getting eaten up by this false information in the press. What are some of the things that you would tell a person like that?
Well, the first thing you have to do is learn the facts, right? And so you sit down with your client, you look at all the documents. I do what's called a scrub. I go in as if I were an investigative reporter, and I say, let me see all your files, sit down, let me interview you, let me interview the people who are associated with this story. And then I look at the facts, and then what's very important is to look at the context. Context is something that journalism kind of puts to the side. And the context determines everything, right? Mm. And then what I do is I present what I consider the truthful and accurate view of this subject to the journalist. Now, I know how a journalist thinks. I think like a journalist. I still consider myself, in my heart of hearts, a journalist. Mm. So I can speak the language, and I can present it in such a way to say, look, it doesn't have to be 100% our way, but it doesn't have to be 100% the other way either. You need to consider these facts because these are very important, and I can back them up with documents. I can have you interview certain people. I can tell you who to talk to. I haven't talked to these people, but you should. And so what we're basically doing is I'm adding information and value to that reporter's information stream, okay? And by that, you start to change and shape the narrative so that it's not so one-sided.
Godsend, man. For people that are a lot of stress, man, meeting you and having you do work like that has got to be just unbelievable, stress relief. One of the cases that you worked on that I hope you don't mind me talking to you about, but it kind of works in with what I do and with family law issues, is you worked on the Sterling case.
Right.
And you in your prior to you opening up your own business, you worked for another agency on this case. That was a case that involved a little bit of a love triangle, I guess, or somebody stepping outside of his marriage, and then there being a lot of publicity, and it ended up reflecting poorly on business interests and things of that nature. And that was the Sterling case again. Can you talk about, in that case, some of the things that you had to do in order to manage the information out there?
Yeah, well, Donald and Shelley Sterling are the biggest landlords in L.A. County, and they own the Clippers, the basketball team. And Don and Shelley are older, they're older folks. They were in their 70s and 80s, and Don had girlfriends, and they were estranged at times, and they weren't estranged as a couple. Well, this time he had a girlfriend. He was living outside the house, and he made a racist comment to the girlfriend, who recorded it and then leaked it to TMZ. Okay, so now you got a racist. You got a problem.
Yeah.
What my firm did is we represented Shelley. Now, Shelley is 50% owner of the Clippers, but she was being dragged into the mud and being smeared by what Don had done. And so we worked with the legal team here, and what we did is we tried to fix in the public's mind the fact that Shelley is a separate person. After all, we are in an age where women are considered separate people, individuals. They make up their own minds. They are accountable for their own behavior, not their spouse's behavior. And so we said, why not apply that to Shelley? And we were able to, I believe, over time, to show her as an individual. Number one, she never made the remark. There were others who were accusing her of being racist, but we disproved that. And then we gave her voice. Shelley, tell your story. And she did. She did the last Barbara Walters interview that Barbara Walters did. She talked to the New York Times. She talked to all sorts of different outlets, and she was basically saying, look, I didn't do this, and this is half mine. Well, that resonated with the NBA, and the NBA said, rather than take this team away from both of you and sell it at a fire sale, Shelley, you know you can't hold on to it because of the Sterling name and what's happened, but we're going to let you control the sale. That woman who was in Donald's shadow her whole life came through and did what nobody could do. She did what the NBA couldn't do, the city couldn't do, the Clippers couldn't do for themselves. She found a buyer, and she brokered a deal in which she sold that franchise for a record $2 billion. Now, how she had to do that? She had to move her husband off the trust that controlled the team. And she was able, and she did, go to court to show that he was not competent to be a trustee. And as sole trustee, then, she was able to sell the team. This is somebody who was always in the shadows and actually wanted nothing to do with the media. But part of what she was able to do was to get people to believe her story.
Okay, and when you're talking about the shadows, there was somebody that was sitting in the shadows in that case, and that was you, because you were sitting right next to her in court.
Well, I wasn't in the shadows, Don. I was. I mean, if
I read the paper, though, I wouldn't see your name, but you were very active.
You would see me in the pictures, though, because I was the guy keeping, trying to keep the reporters from, ganging up on her, but and walking with her to the car. But no, I sat next to her in court the whole time.
And when you're talking about going to these Barbara Walters and doing these interviews and things, those are some of the things that you were active in, and getting her prepared.
Right, getting her prepared and also making it possible.
Okay, and that's something that I've seen you do on a few cases. Really impressive how you're able to get press releases out there and to make the connections you do so that your client is speaking to the people and putting things in their light. And I'm sure that Ms. Sterling was very appreciative of your work on that case. I mean, to be honest with you, so should Mr. Sterling if he was of sound mind. I mean, you basically saved a lot of money for the family. One of the other cases, and I didn't have this on my outline, but I hope you don't mind me speaking of this, is you and I have a good friend by the name of Jeff Milan. And he's an attorney locally. He was involved in a case, and you assisted him in that case. There's two things that I remember about that. One is that you helped draft the pleadings so that the story came out. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Well, I didn't so much draft the pleadings, but I do this for all, and I work with a lot of attorneys. So this is sort of stock and trade for me, is that you've got to understand reporters, they don't have time to go through a 19-page, pleading, whereas, therefore.
Yeah.
Huh? You got to put it up front. You got to have a summary that gives the most important information and then points to areas where if they have to jump down into page 17, for instance, where they can look at this. Because reporters are under a tremendous amount of pressure. In the old days, I could wait till 5 o'clock and file my story. Now, you're competing on a moment-by-moment basis with other outlets. So the sooner you get that story up, the better it is for you as a reporter. So what I dedicate my time to is making things as easy as possible for reporters to get the main points, even to the point where in some cases we might, under an embargo basis, go to the reporter and say, here, this story's coming out, have a first look at this. Any questions here? Because it's kind of complicated. And we know that we're doing a service to the reporter and we're doing the service to the client to get that story out accurately. So in this case, I don't want to mention what the case was.
Right.
I reviewed the filing and said, Jeff, you need actually an overview here. And sorry, I'm Italian. I talk with my hands, so I'm bumping the microphone. But and that was very helpful.
It was very helpful.
And it was also helpful for him because he had to do, press statements in the way that just like a little holding statement. He was able to see how you had to compress all this together and make it pithy and make it to the point.
That's what lawyers do, and they, for opening statements. So you really helped him with that, even his opening and closing statements in that regard. I don't think I've ever told you this, but I knew that you guys were working on this case. And of course, I was very interested in it because it involved something that was newsworthy. I was on vacation. I believe I was in Florida. And I woke up one morning, looked at the paper, and there was this press release. Man, there was this article on this story, and it just like hit me like boom. It was the first thing that I saw. And I know that was strategic as well. You got ahead of the story so that you didn't let the other side control the narrative.
Well, we were going to control it anyway because we were the first mover. And that's something I would like to emphasize to your listeners, is that many times people believe, well, if there's a story coming out, I shouldn't say anything and it'll go away. In today's digital world, it's there forever. It's on the internet. If you want to see your reputation, Google yourself. That's your reputation, the first 2 pages of your Google listing, okay? So if somebody is the first mover, they have an advantage. They set the narrative, and then everyone else follows that narrative. So in where, let's say, you're going to file for divorce. You're going to file on behalf of a client for divorce. You have that advantage because you open the conversation, and you get to say what your narrative is, right?
All right.
And in this case, we were going to have the advantage because we were filing the complaint, but it had to be crystal clear. Because if you don't have it right on point, then the adversary or other commentators can take it and twist it and turn it. And so that's what it was sharpening the pencil, more or less.
Yeah, it was good. Wow. So let's move over to family law a little bit.
Okay.
Like we started this, we're talking about people doing things and saying things in public to smear somebody's reputation. Do you think that today it's more of a problem than it was, say, 30 years ago?
Yes.
And why is that?
Well, because I think people are getting they're getting wise, I guess is the right, maybe not the right word, but they're getting wise to the fact that there are 2 conversations going on at least in a legal proceeding. There's the legal conversation that's made within the courthouse with the rulings and whatnot. Then there's the public conversation, okay? And essentially today, you're operating in a world where there are no walls in the courtroom. This smartphone that you have in your pocket, the judge has one, the potential jurors have one, the clerk has one, everyone in the courthouse has one. And if your trial is, or your case is significant enough, and it doesn't have to be that you got to be a world famous star. You could have a restaurant. You could have an establishment, a business, right? And it's a family business that people may know about or may do some significant revenue. If it's involved in a court case, it's going to pop up on that smartphone if people Google you, right? Mm-hmm. So people are becoming aware of the fact that the conversation you have in the public narrative affects
without
the
a
legal.
Doubt, more than ever.
Right?
Yeah.
And so they're becoming wise to that, and they're starting to use it. And they're able to use it because there are a lot more tools. Google, picks up the Facebook posting, Twitter, the tweets, Instagram, all these things come up now on Google. And these are things, the platforms that you control. So the old game was, could I interest the newspaper in covering my case? Now you don't even need that. Now people go right around the newspaper and they just do social media campaigns. And if you get enough traction there, that generates news stories.
Yeah.
Right? So it's kind of turned things on their head a little bit. And people are using social media more and more.
Yeah. So do you have any statistics you could share with us?
Well, just a few. How important is a reputation? I like to tell people, the good book in Proverbs says that a good name is more desirable than great riches, and to be esteemed is better than silver or gold. But it also is silver and gold. Because when recently a recent poll of communications professionals found that they estimated more than half of a company's revenue is attributed to its product, its brand equity, its reputation. Okay, so what people think about it. And 75% of these people felt that they were unprepared if they were to be attacked. And mostly they'll be attacked on social media. I found a mouse in my soup, you know. I found a fly in my breaded chicken. And all you need is one tweet. Yelp, for instance. People are scared to death of Yelp. Someone will come in, they don't like the meal, and many times they haven't even been there. Right? And they're tweeting about you, or they're putting something on your Yelp review. And study after study shows that if you got one or two bad dings on your Yelp review or on your Google results, people stay away. And that's the pernicious thing of it, is you don't know how much you're losing, because people never say, oh, I would have come and eaten at your restaurant, but no, I'm not going to do it now because I read this on Yelp. They just stay away. And you start to see this drag on your revenue. So you need to be prepared. And if you're going to go into a divorce or a family law situation, and you have a profile in your community, one of the things your attorney should do is prepare you to speak about it, or to have your attorney ready to speak about it. The other thing that is generating a lot of what you've noticed, this phenomena, is when you file something in a court case, right, it's privileged. So it could be the most outrageous lie, but a reporter can report it.
Yeah.
Anybody can report it. It's privileged, right?
Privilege meaning what to you?
Meaning that you can't sue me for saying it. Right? It's privilege.
And people lie in family court all the time.
I'm shocked to hear that, Don.
What time is it right now?
Yeah,
How many people are lying right now? No,
and I told you before that when I was a reporter and I wanted to do a profile of anybody, the first thing I would ask is, have they been divorced? And I would go right to that divorce filing, and I would find their financials, and I would dig out all the dirt, right? And at that point, it was up to me to say, okay, is this really real, or is it just something that's being thrown around? I had to make that evaluation. Some reporters don't care. You could say that, your ex, broke 15 windows, and reporters will put that in the paper and say, according to the lawsuit, and they feel like morally they're okay. I never felt that way, and I think a responsible reporter will weigh that. But that possibility is there.
Yeah.
And so the other question is, what is a reporter anymore? It used to be a craft, like a guild. You would come up through the ranks. You would learn how to treat people, what was good, what wasn't. Now, I don't have to buy a printing press to put out a publication. I have to buy a laptop or maybe a smartphone, and I'll go to the court and I'll just take a picture of that page and send it out without any context, without any perspective, and you're toast.
Yeah.
Because on the smartphone, when that link comes up, it all looks the same. You could have the New York Times, and you can have the Schweitzer Times right there, and it looks the same.
Yeah. I had a case where I represented a public figure, and it was amazing what the reporters were getting ahead of me, even the pleadings and things like that. They were like digging in the court file. So in your profession, if it was a divorce case, and you got somebody who is being preyed upon, the way that you've described, what would you be doing to help them? Well, what are the kinds of things? Because obviously I had to give you some specific facts. But
yeah, because so much of this is fact-driven. But obviously you will know, as the attorney, you will know what the vulnerabilities are of this person, right? Whether a person has had a domestic violence issue, or whether there was some accusation of sexual assault or anything.
An affair.
Affairs, I don't know. I don't know how much people get jazzed about that, depending on whether you're a minister, or whether you're somebody who's self-righteous about it, and then all of a sudden it turns out you have an affair. Then hypocrisy always is a good excuse to do a story. But I think what you're talking about here are knowing in advance what the vulnerabilities are, knowing in advance what the worst could be said, and then putting in your own filings something that could be used to mitigate that. All right. So you have a reporter or you have someone who's looking at this filing. You can say, yes, they say that. We address it here. And it's equally privileged. So that way you open the door for the reporter to say, okay, this side says this side says that. So you got a 50-50. You're not going to get any better than that when it comes to a filing.
Yeah.
Think about the disadvantage you have, though. If you don't put it in your filing, if you don't put in something defensive in your filing, you've got someone making an accusation, and then you've got an attorney calling, or maybe I'm calling saying, let me give you some background on this. The reporter's naturally going to say, well, you know, I'm going to weigh this, and if you were really serious, you would put it in your filing.
Right.
So I'm going to give a little bit more weight to what is already in the filing.
Interesting. Well, we are getting well into the program. I want to change topics a little bit. I've got some fun stuff for you to weigh in on, if you don't mind.
Okay.
Okay. So I've noticed, I look at articles all the time about divorce and things that, you know, we're all familiar with the cases where a celebrity is going through a divorce, and there's a lot of coverage over, you know, the fighting over the kids and things of that nature. I've come across 2 articles where they're talking about the divorce isn't happening or it was dismissed. And I'll show you the first article. It involves a gentleman by the name, or an actor by the name of Jim Belushi.
Oh, I know him, yeah.
From Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
And it says he just pulled a 180 on his divorce case, filing for the case to be dismissed in court. And, you know, it's not so much that this is happening while I'm bringing this on this program, but who would have been given the press this information? Doesn't that look like it might be a concerted effort from him or his handlers to say, hey, back off, you know, I've dismissed this, or what?
Well, typically in a celebrity issue like this, you've got both sides talking to the press. And this is a TMZ?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
TMZ's, I got to say, Harvey Levin, who is the person who created TMZ, he's an attorney.
Yeah.
And he covered the OJ trial. He knows the law backwards and forwards, and he's a very reasonable person.
Yeah.
I've dealt with him before. But his main thing is to get the news first. He wants people to quote TMZ, which is a very smart branding strategy. So he's talking to the sides. He knows what's coming down. And yes, celebrity publicists will leak things here and there that look favorable or unfavorable to depending on what.
And for some reason, I think the
spin.
public looked upon people badly because they're going through a divorce, you know, and people get hammered because of that sometimes.
They do, but you know, how many people get divorced? What's the percentage?
Yeah, it's at least 50%, right?
Well, okay, and so that I think the wow factor is a little less now than it used to be.
Yeah.
You know, it's not the 1930s anymore, the 1940s. People get divorced. That's almost like a stage of life. You know, you go to elementary school, middle school,
Sure.
high school,
But
blah, 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 and then you get divorced,
Wh-
right?
wh-
And
why
then you
do-
get
wh-
remarried.
Why don't they keep
So it's-
reporting on it, though?
Yeah.
Why do they
well,
keep
because it's interesting.
Okay.
You know, and it's a change.
Okay, well, here's another one. Steve Harvey's wife pretty much just shut down the divorce rumors. So this is one where there wasn't even a filing from what I could see. And the article says, is Steve Harvey getting a divorce from his wife of 11 years? You know, it's on everybody's mind. But then, you know, Marjorie herself would never allow that to happen and, you know, put out the statement that they're not getting a divorce. Now, this looks like it's a spin control to me.
Well, and you have to look at, and I'm not going to mention
The publication?
Yeah, I'm not going to mention the publication. I will tell you this publication is not ranked up there with CNN
Okay.
and New York Times, right?
Okay.
And so I'll tell you what. One of the secrets in today's journalism ecosystem is it's all about the headline, right? Because you need to click
Yeah.
on this article, right?
I know a lot of the articles don't have anything to do with the headlines these days.
Bingo.
Yeah.
Bingo. And that's affecting even mainstream media. You watch, and I've watched how the headlines have changed. And they'll say things like, this California town is, you know, facing the biggest threat from fires this season. That, you have to click to find out what. Instead of Stockton will be facing the highest, risk for fires this season, which is an old-fashioned headline, right?
Yeah.
That's why things are changing this way. And, is Steve Harvey getting into? Put a question mark in your headline. You're going to get a click.
Wow.
You can raise, is Don Schweitzer really 8 feet tall? Question mark.
No, for all my viewers.
Yeah. Okay. So.
Although he wishes he was.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Last article. Now, this is something that I want your viewpoint as to whether this is a good way to publicize, people's feelings. And this is about men around the country wearing high heels to walk a mile in her shoes. So apparently, there's a group of men. Have you heard of this story?
No.
Okay. So there is a domestic violence movement, or to fight that, and the men have been showing up at these events, and they've been filmed walking around in women's high heels as a statement against domestic violence. And apparently, it's catching wind. It was done up in, I think, San Jose, and there's
Chicago too, by the way.
Yeah. So, what do you think about that type of publicity?
Well, this is we used to call these brights. These are cute little stories. They're kind of funny, chuckle. Medicine is the best laughter kind of thing in Reader's Digest, right? And what I think about that, I love these little kind of articles. I look for these things myself. I think they're kind of amusing, and people are goofy, And actually, this is quite it's quite clever for men to do this, to walk a mile in her shoes.
I'll bet you any money you're going to see this a lot for a long time.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And this is also clickbait. People, and it's eye candy, basically. News candy.
And possibly attracting attention to a very serious problem in society. Possibly. Yeah.
Right. Absolutely.
Cool.
I really appreciate you having me on your podcast. Thank you
Ralph,
so much.
Thank you. And, for all of our viewers out there, just contact me, because Ralph is a personal friend of mine. And if you're interested in utilizing his services or getting to talk to him as a consultation, I'm certainly a person that would strongly make a referral. Thank you.
Thank you.
And, hopefully we'll get you on the show again sometime.
Good.
Okay. Thank you for watching Exhibit A.
Exhibit A is produced by David Lindley at the law offices of Donald P. Schweitzer in Pasadena, California. For more information, visit us online at PasadenaLawOffice.com and all social media platforms.